Welcome in to the LSU Insider Podcast. Today is Tuesday, September the 9th. I'm Zach Ewing. That's Reed Darcy and Scott Rabelais, two members of our crack LSU reporting staff at The Advocate. And we're here to kind of tie a bow on the Louisiana Tech game, look forward to Florida. And I think most of anything, guys, is just sort of like, let's take stock of what we've seen after 2 weeks. I don't want to dive too much specifically into La Tech. It was just sort of a sleepy game. We did the post-game show. I mean, there's lots of issues. But I want to dive into some of those offensive issues and look big picture at how much of this really is a problem for LSU.
It was a weird game. Rab, I like that line you had in your column. This was just a weird game. That's what it felt like. I thought it was a good way to summarize it. There's a lot of concerning things I kind of saw, but overall, it was just one of those sleepy nights in Tiger Stadium, against a non-conference team. So we can break it down, but it was just overall just a weird night. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you knew all the emphasis they put on the Clemson game. It was going to be less, right? It was going to be less intensity, less focus, less energy. And once they got the lead, and the LSU, they could never put La Tech away, but they never seemed really threatened either. I mean, there was like, oh boy, like the Nicholls State game last year. I was like, man, they could lose the lead here.
What Clemson and Troy did,
Yeah, exactly. So you never really felt LSU was threatened. The defense was played so well. Yeah, they just held them at arm's length the whole game, but just couldn't impose their will. And obviously, this is a recurring theme for LSU, especially with the running game and the offensive line, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I do think part of it is expectation. Like LSU beats Clemson in this spotlight national game. Huge performance, huge win. LSU goes up to number 3 in the country. They're ranked number 1 by some people, biggest win in the country. And it was almost like, okay, they got that out of the way. Now let's see some fireworks. This is the number 1 team in the country. Let's go. Or a top 5 team. And it just never happened. And I think there was a little bit of like, wait a minute, are these guys who we thought they were preseason, or are they the team that beat Clemson? And then when you combine that with, as you mentioned, how Clemson played against Troy, and you have this team, Troy's a good Sun Belt team, but they're still, they're like La Tech. They're just a group of 5 team. They're not particularly a good group of 5 team. They're just sort of there. And they did the same thing offensively to Clemson that LSU did. And then LSU struggling. There was just like this 4-hour span where you had to adjust your expectations again and say, well, wait a minute, how good is LSU?
And Louisiana Tech, I think, legitimately has a good defense, a good Conference USA defense,
yeah.
but a good defense. But I think the bottom line is if you're a team like LSU and you want to compete for a national championship contenders, just blow the doors off these kinds of teams. And that's what you want to see from those kinds of games. Generally speaking, they look dominant and the game's over after a quarter. That's not what happened here. Garrett Nussmeier had to stay in the whole game and he threw 41 passes. So it's not totally encouraging if you're an LSU fan, but I think it matters a whole lot more what they did in week 1 and what they'll do this week against Florida.
Well, at the same time, you're seeing this from other teams as well. Penn State has played 2 cupcakes to start the season, and they haven't killed them. Yeah, Ohio State killed Grambling. You really just destroyed Grambling. Was it 70-0 or something like that? But LSU would have beaten Grambling pretty handily as well. Texas took a long time to get going against San Jose State on Saturday at home. So I think this is, I think, in the transfer portal era and everything, things are a little more NFL-like. It used to be the gap could be this big between teams in terms of talent from an SEC team to a Group of 5 team. Now it's maybe it's a little more like that, but probably was to be expected a little bit for LSU. It seemed like they got to a point in the game where it's like, okay, we're going to win the game. We're not going to lose this game. Let's just get the clock to run down to 0, and we start getting ready for Florida next week in the SEC opener, which I expect they're going to play with more intensity and effort and urgency against Florida than they did against La Tech. Yeah, they better, for sure.
And I think on the other side is true too. I said, Reed, to you in the press box a couple of different times, is like Louisiana Tech is mostly interested in saving face here. That's what it felt like. It did not feel like they ever thought they could win the game, especially once they fall behind 10 and 17-0 and things like that. But they were punting from the plus 40. They were not doing things an underdog does to hey, let's take our 1 in 100 shot here and try to win this game. They were just sort of like, we're okay losing 23-7. That looks good for us.
There were a couple 4th and shorts and plus territory that, maybe you would have liked to see them try to get it and see what happens.
Right. Like if you're going to, I don't know, take your shot, right? Shoot your shot, as they say. But Louisiana Tech, especially once the game, 10-0, 17-0, they seemed very content to just, let's just save face. And then there was the one moment, Rab, where they scored. It was 20-7 with like 6 minutes left. And you go, well, this game is not entirely over here. Like if LSU turns the ball over and Louisiana Tech scores another touchdown, we've got a one-possession game. And then LSU did what it needed to do. Harlan Berry had the long run. They got the field goal. Okay, game's over. And as you guys said, if LSU turns around and thumps Florida this week and, goes to Ole Miss in a couple weeks and wins, this is just a blip on the radar. No one cares about how LSU looked on Saturday.
Exactly. And I got to say, I've seen this game against Louisiana Tech before. Back when Les Miles was coaching and Derek Dooley, who had coached at LSU, was the coach at La Tech, they would beat him like 19-7. It was a game like that where it's just kind of, I don't know. It's just like La Tech brings a bunch of sleeping pills with them when they come to play LSU or something. It's just one of those games. Now they play Southeastern next week. Southeastern is not. They lost 24-0 to La Tech. They're not gonna have any chance to beat LSU. But La Tech, they've got just enough moxie and talent, and this is our biggest game because we're playing the school that didn't want to recruit me, that kind of thing. So you're going to see a reasonable effort from them. But I predicted a big blowout win for LSU. I said 48-13 or something like that. But this was a lot more predictable that what actually happened Saturday than for them to LSU just be clicking on all cylinders and just knocking them off the ball and they get the starters out of there midway through the third quarter. That in hindsight, that was not as realistic as what we saw on Saturday was.
Yeah. So what we do want to do is on today's show is dig into some of the offensive issues and maybe make a determination are these real issues? Is it just noise? And if they are real issues, are they fixable for LSU going forward? So we'll kind of dig into some of the offensive issues. First, want to let you know that the LSU Sports Insider podcast is brought to you by Jerry Lane Cadillac. Command the road in a Cadillac where luxury, power, and presence come together. Experience it today at Jerry Lane Cadillac. So offensive issues, LSU's not getting shut down. They've scored a couple touchdowns in each game. They've been in scoring position, but we have a few different things. The first one I want to start is with the injuries, because I think that's, moving forward, the most tangible, is this going to be an issue or not? Braylon Moore went out on the first play of the game, and never underestimate the impact of a starting center in a football game. We saw it last year with the Saints. Eric McCoy went out. It was a completely different offense after that point. So when we talk about all these offensive issues, if Braylon Moore is out, that's a problem to me. And then the other one would be Trades Green, the big tight end and red zone target, and we'll talk about red zone later too, who leaves later in the game with a knee injury. Brian Kelly called both of these guys questionable to play this week. It doesn't sound like either one is in danger of missing the season or anything, but they may miss it.
And two really significant players. And the good news for LSU is that they don't have significant injuries. But, we'll monitor it throughout the week. Or just a quick reminder that LSU is going to put out its first availability report of the season. We will get that on Wednesday, the first one, and that should give us more of a clue in terms of how close these guys are to playing. But the bottom line is that you might have seen some reporting over the weekend that Braylon Moore had a high ankle sprain. Brian Kelly said it was more of like a normal ankle sprain. He wasn't really ready to call it a high ankle sprain, and Trades Green has a sprained MCL. Nothing super long term, but I personally would be pretty surprised if either of them played this week. It seems like a pretty quick turnaround for that, and it's a big deal. The offensive line, it needs Braylon Moore to bring everything together. He's really important. He's the best player on that offensive line, and without him, it's going to be kind of a struggle, and it can be. And without Trades Green, then LSU loses that red zone threat that it really needs to convert those red zone chances into scoring opportunities. So I think the injuries are pretty significant because they're, to two pretty significant players, and we'll see exactly how much time they have to miss.
And this is through preseason camp, through the first 2 weeks of the season, this is the first significant injuries LSU's had. I mean, a lot of times you lose a player, in preseason camp. He broke a foot, he tore an ACL or something like that, and that hasn't happened for LSU. But they are going to happen eventually. The interesting thing during the game, Braylon Moore, he got hurt on the very first play of the game. Someone landed on the back of his heel, I guess, and he went in for X-rays, came back, tried to warm up or something. He kind of re-aggravated, according to this listening to radio. I'm listening to LSU radio during the game. It apparently re-aggravated it, so that might have been a thing. He'll be back, but I don't want to say Brian Kelly was fibbing when he talked to us yesterday, but I think he was really sugarcoating these injuries. I'd be shocked if either of these guys played on Saturday. I just think you can come back from really as significant as they looked at the time, and they weren't as serious as they could have been. But I'd be shocked if either of them could play on Saturday. So you go with DJ Chester at center, and you got to go with Bauer Sharp at tight end, and work your way from there.
And they both kind of happened in a similar way. They both had, bodies kind of fall on their legs, and then their legs kind of twist awkwardly. So it was kind of the same situation. And Trey, as Green should point out, that injury happened in the fourth quarter. LSU's first team offense was still on the field.
Good point.
Yeah, all of its starters were still out there. If LSU had put that game away early, maybe he wouldn't have been on the field that late into the game to get, an opportunity to be hurt in the first place. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. I do think in the day and age of injury reports, which this is an SEC game, as you mentioned, we'll get an injury report. This is the second year of these mandated injury reports. And you see this in the NFL too. Everybody's just questionable. Unless you are 100.00% sure, no doubt in your mind that a guy is either going to play or that he's going to be out. You just put questionable because, is Brian Kelly really optimistic these guys will play? I think you're right. I think they're probably just kind of being, pie in the sky. Maybe there's a chance that he feels way better on Thursday or something, and we can put him in a practice and he can play. But in the meantime, if you don't know that, he's questionable because then you can always, you don't want to say he's out and then all of a sudden a miracle does happen and now you've falsified your injury report, just like you don't want to say he's going to play and then he doesn't. And that, everybody's just questionable. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I don't know, I'm with you guys. You try to get through this Florida game without them. You won't need them against Southeastern next week. That gives them 3 full weeks to recover from these injuries, which is a more realistic timeline. And they try to get back for Ole Miss.
You list them as questionable because you want Florida to at least spend a little bit time preparing for the possibility that either or both of them could play because, the more time they spend preparing for a situation that might not happen, then you kind of play mind games like that, have some gamesmanship there. I think that absolutely is something that happens with these availability reports.
So if we play this game of, is this a real issue or is this just sort of small sample size? I'd say it's a real issue for Saturday, but maybe not beyond that.
Yes. Yeah,
temporary.
Exactly. Yeah. The good news is, they both, when they went down, looked like these could be things that could be put them out for the season, and that apparently is not.
Trace Green's on crutches after.
He was in with a brace knee and everything, and Braylon Moore was finished watching the game in street clothes. But like Kelly said, I think Kelly was definitely being very candid about this. That you can have that tightrope procedure on for a high ankle sprain. Remember Tua Tagovailoa before the LSU game in 2019, and he said he doesn't need that. So that's encouraging. But you got to get through this dangerous game without two very important weapons, and you got to be. In any sport, you got to be strong up the middle, and obviously, quarterback and tailback and center is where you got to be strong. And like DJ Chester, he's not the greatest center in LSU history, but he did start there all last season. So it's if you're going to get hurt, this is the last player you want to get hurt probably on your offensive line, but you do have a guy who has done this job before and knows what to do, and that's DJ Chester. So.
Today's injury report was brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. Going to do one more offensive issue here before we take our break, and that's, to me, is my personal opinion, the big one, and that's the running game. I'm still, the rushing totals look okay for LSU. They've gone over 100 yards in both games. I'm still saying if you can't get yourself out of more 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 9s and things consistently, you're asking for trouble.
The numbers are a little misleading when you look at them, just the counting numbers. I hate to play the game where you start saying, oh, if you take away this run, the long run, then the numbers look like this. I hate to play that game. But, if you do it with LSU's game against La Tech on Saturday, if you take away the 2 long runs, the one by Xavier Thomas in the first quarter and the one by Harlem Berry in the second quarter, LSU had about 28 carries for about 63 yards or so.
And the sacks.
And
because the sack yardage counts against
that's actually set with the sacks factored out.
Okay.
So that doesn't look good. I don't want to take away the big runs, but that just goes to show that the run game was inconsistent and it was inefficient, right? And Zach, you pulled some numbers on the yardage, and you have those in terms of how many carries picked up more than 2 yards. It just seems like the running game is not faring very well. Clemson, they mixed it together with the screens up the middle to the boundary, and that helped things open up a little bit. But through 2 weeks, I don't think it has been as good as LSU fans hoped it would be, and it looks a lot like it did last year.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think, I don't want to dismiss the long runs, because if LSU was averaging, the same average, but they didn't have the long runs, we'd be sitting here saying, well, where are the big plays? I don't want
exactly.
I don't want to play both sides of this thing. So it's good that they're getting the big plays. But I just don't okay, so here are the numbers. LSU, when you, again, excluding sacks and kneel downs, LSU has had 59 rushing attempts this year. 14 of those have gone for 0 or negative yardage. 21 have gone for either 1 or 2 yards. Only 11, and this to me is the key number of all, 11 of them have gone for between 3 and 5 yards. And then they have 13 6+, which is a healthy number. To me, the problem is that 3 to 5 range. 11 of 59, that's less than 20% of your runs, are getting, you need more 4s and 5s and 6s so that you're setting up 2nd and 5, and then, maybe 3rd and 1, and you don't even have to throw a pass to get a first down. That's what's missing to me, Rap.
Yeah, LSU's running game is like a batter in baseball who he's got power, but he strikes out 7 times out of 10, and 1 out of 10 he's going to hit a home run, or 1 out of 20. It's is it enough to be worth all the strikeouts, all those unproductive at bats? LSU's had a lot of unproductive at bats with their running game, and it just goes back to the fact that they're not opening holes. I mean, for a good healthy 5 to 7 yard gain, you're opening a hole and the running back gets through it, and he gets tackled by the linebacker, but you're making progress and taking pressure off a Nussmeier in the passing game to convert these 3rd and longs, as Reed said. So it's a big problem. It's great to have be a more pass forward offense like LSU has been the last few years, but you have to have that threat of the running game. You can't just have teams sit back and say, we don't have to respect that. And you already have a quarterback who is, yes, Garrett took off and ran against Clemson a couple of times. He didn't really against La Tech, already even attempted to. And he's mobile, but he's not going to run. He's not going to be that threat.
His only rushing attempts against La Tech were sacks, I believe.
Yeah,
I don't think he actually ran.
Yeah, minus 27 yards. So you're taking away that option, that possibility as well for opposing defenses. So it just gives us you got to do it. And I'm not ready to abandon a ship on the LSU running game of the offensive line. I think they can get better. I remember, especially when Braylon Moore comes back, I think they can get better and more effective. But it's not something, again, like expecting Moore or Green to play this week. It's not something you expect to be very effective against Florida, which has had its problems this past week, but still has a good defense.
We should point out real quick, Zach, we should point out that Clemson has 2 first-round picks on this defensive line, so that's something that could skew these numbers. And La Tech plays a 3-3 defense. They got 3 down linemen and 3 linebackers behind them, and that can be tough to run against, as Brian Kelly pointed out, both on Saturday after the game and yesterday when he had his press conference. But at the same time, I feel like against a team like Louisiana Tech, LSU has the physical advantage, the athletic advantage. It should be able to push some of those guys around, should be able to create that,
Bully them.
you know, just create that push, move the line of scrimmage down and open up holes. And it felt like the offensive line, especially on the interior, couldn't really do that against Louisiana Tech. And I think that's a pretty large concern because you wanted to see LSU control the pace and flow of that game with its rushing attack, given the advantages it has in terms of strength and athleticism. And instead, Garrett Nussmeier had to throw 41 pass attempts and play the whole game.
I just wanted to drill down a little bit more on some of those numbers I said. I separated them into running back carries. So this is now excluding not only sacks and kneel downs, but also Nuss had a couple of runs against Clemson. One, I think, was over 10 yards, so excluding that. And then the wide receiver runs, which have been pretty effective. Xavier Thomas, we've seen bust a couple of nice runs. Barry and Brown had a good one on Saturday. So I'm excluding these now too. And the reason I'm doing that is just because I think that's good. Because, again, I don't want to play both sides. If LSU wasn't doing that, we'd be sitting here saying, well, you've got to do something else and get the receivers involved in the run game. They're doing that. So that's good. But you still need the bread and butter of your running backs, just traditional in between the tackle running plays or over the tackle running plays to pick up enough yardage to just allow you to run your offense without having to be behind the sticks. And if you just separated into running backs, so we're talking Harlon Berry, Juwan Johnson, Caleb Jackson, and of course, Caden Durham. So they've had 45 carries in the two games. Against Clemson, they had 22 carries. Only 8 of them went for 3 or more yards. So 8 out of 22. And again, you say, okay, Clemson's got one of the best fronts in the country. That's going to get better. Well, against La Tech, it was 8 of 23. They had 23 carries, and only 8 went for 3 or more yards. Again, looking just at running backs. So the long plays have been there. We saw Harlon Berry, who I guess it almost looks like he's been promoted to the number 2 running back. We could talk about that.
We certainly haven't seen much from Caleb Jackson.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, Juwan Johnson is still there.
Juwan Johnson's there,
He
too.
was in ahead of Harlon Berry against Clemson.
Yeah. But whoever it is, Durham or Berry or Jackson or Johnson or whoever, that push is just not there. Too often they're getting stopped right at the line of scrimmage or just a yard or two after. So my question to you guys as we kind of wrap this part of it up, this is a real issue. I think that's obvious. Is it fixable? Last year, the offensive line was completely different. LSU had the same issue. So is it a scheme thing? Is it another just different O-line having the same problems? Is it fixable?
I think it is fixable to an extent. What I've seen is that LSU is really trying to get creative because that kind of tells me that it doesn't fully trust its ability to get those dirty yards, the 4 or 5 yards at a time, just with a traditional inside zone kind of run game. That comes down to the screens and the little receiver kind of gadgety runs that LSU has dialed up. So I think when you have all of that together and you have a good, effective game plan, and Joe Sloan, the offensive play caller, is in sync, dialing up the right times for the runs and mixing in the screens, I think it can work. And overall, it can be kind of a combination of things that lead to, semblance of a good run game. But the bottom line is that LSU needs to get more push from the interior of its offensive line. It's played 2 good run defenses now. We'll see how it does against Florida this week. But unless it gets that push that it really needs and opens up those holes, then I think it's always going to kind of be something that holds this offense back, and that it needs to get kind of creative to sort of work around it. And that's not an ideal situation you want to be in.
No, but it's been fun to watch, though, the thing they're doing with Xavier Thomas and things like that. I mean, it's been kind of cool, and these running backs have shown the ability to, the very first play from scrimmage for LSU at Clemson, Durham spun away from a tackle, and he ran around the end for their longest gain on the ground of the night. So it's never going to be great. I think it can be better. But it's never going to be truly great. But you got to keep trying, and despite that, LSU has really dominated the time of possession in both games, about 37 minutes in both games. So you would think it would take a good running game to do that, but you can compensate with and you can also compensate with the short passing game, which they've done a lot of that, throwing passes in the flats and throwing some more, maybe a little more screen action than we've seen from LSU in the past. So Nussmeier wasn't super accurate against La Tech either, but I think typically he's going to be better. So there are ways to get around it, but just knocking people off the ball like it's like 1995 Nebraska, no, probably not. They're not going to see that from this team.
I think that my biggest issue here is that if you want to be a truly elite team and a national title contender, LSU's number 3 in the country, they're a national title contender, you got to be able to just kind of hit teams in the mouth and get these yards sometimes. And is Clemson a good defense? Yes. Is La Tech a good defense? Yes. For the level that they're at, they're a very good defense. You're going to face even better defenses, or at least similar to Clemson down the road. And if you can't find a way to get those yards, you're going to keep running into the same issues.
It's going to get tough in the red zone as well. LSU's been pretty good in the red zone so far, but it's one area where they really struggled last year, and in a large part reason why they struggled in the red zone last year was because they didn't have a trustworthy, consistent run game. And that's what you really want, just something to trust, something to lean on, something that is going to be there for you when you need it. Because if you can't trust it, then you go away from it, and then you're putting too much pressure on Garrett Nussmeier, and you get in obvious passing situations, and then things just start to unravel from there. So I think just having that consistent, reliable rushing attack could do wonders for this offense. Through 2 weeks, for what it's worth, we have not seen it.
Reed, just professional segue there. We're going to talk red zone next. First, we're going to take a break on the LSU Insider podcast. We'll be back with more on the LSU offense and then start to take a look at the Florida game as well right after this.
I think the biggest thing that separates us is our people. We have a really amazing staff that really care about their customers, really care about our product. At Jerry Lane Cadillac, we value trust and transparency above all else. We have a little bit of something for everyone, so whether it be the 2025 Escalade, any of the smaller crossover vehicles, the XT4, 5, and 6, we've also got a wide variety of new EVs, including the 2025 electric Escalade IQ. I think the product lineup right now is the best that it's ever been in Cadillac.
Did they ask you to do the commercial too?
Yeah, but they just gave me one line.
Bet like a Caesar. Like, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna tell them how Caesar's Sportsbook is just so easy to use that you can watch and bet thousands of sports events, even some NFL games.
They'll probably show us betting on our favourite players and teams at all the Vegas hotspots too.
Like, we have time for that montage.
I told him I couldn't do it.
They couldn't afford me.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You give me love.
And welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Zach Ewing hanging out with Reed Darcy and Scott Ravelay on this Tuesday. You can subscribe to the LSU Sports Insider on our YouTube page. And while you're at it, leave a comment, hit the like button, tell us what you think of the show. We appreciate all of that. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We're going through trying to diagnose and play some doctor on the LSU offense in this show. LSU's offense through 2 weeks, 83rd in the country in total offense, tied 108th in the country in scoring offense with just 20 points per game. So not good. Defensive side, look, everything's rosy. Top 15 defense right now, looks really good thus far. But this offense has led people to really have some doubts, especially after the La Tech game. So we talked the running game and some of the injuries. Now we're going to do red zone. Reed, you mentioned it before the break. Here are the numbers. LSU's been in the red zone 8 times this year. They've scored 4 touchdowns. It's not terrible. They've scored 3 field goals, and then they had the 1 possession at the end of the first half against Clemson where they didn't score. I don't think that those are terrible numbers. I did not look up where those rank in the country or anything, but a 50% touchdown percentage in the red zone is generally okay. I know LSU would obviously like it to be better. Brian Kelly specifically mentioned it. What do you think?
I think it's been fine so far, but I'm a little concerned with how it'll look without Trey'Dez Green, because LSU really, it seems like it's a big part of the offense, having him involved in the red zone. You saw his touchdown against Clemson. It lined up, bunched 4 receivers on the right side, left Trey'Dez isolated on the left side, and then just had him run a fade pattern and just beat his man one-on-one and try to come down with a contested grab. That seems like it's going to be a really important play for the LSU offense this season, and it feels like it's a play that he can usually make. We mentioned on the podcast, there's a good chance you're either going to interfere with him and you're going to get a penalty called, or he's going to come down with a catch. And so not having him forever, however much time he's going to miss, whether it's 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I think is a big deal, and it should cause some more problems for this LSU offense. So without him, and in the absence of a real running game that you can use to stay ahead of the sticks and give you some short down and distances inside the red zone and push through, power through, and get into the end zone, it's going to be kind of difficult for LSU to improve those red zone numbers. We saw it wasn't very good last year, so now I'm a little concerned that without Trey'Dez Green and without a consistent rushing attack, it might not be as good as LSU's hoping it to be.
But they're going to have to muddle. I don't. Florida again looks like they have a pretty good defense. So I don't think they expect LSU to score 40 points in this game. No, it didn't matter if they were clicking, very well offensively. So I think they're still going to try to make the tight end part of the offense with Bower Sharp and then Donovan Green, the third string tight end. See what they can do there. But I don't think they're going to abandon it. But it's a weapon that they're without, and this. I guess we kind of saw this coming a little bit in the preseason. I mean, the defense really looked good against the offense, and is it the defense is good or the offense is good? Well, obviously the defense is good, and the offense has had some issues. And it seems like teams are trying to, Again, they don't respect the run. They're trying to take away the deep balls, the vertical passing game from LSU, and trying to make them settle for the shorter stuff. So we'll see what they can do against Florida. They have to get creative again to try to combat the loss of Trey'Dez Green and then Braylon Moore as well. But it's they have shown that creativity so far. So we'll see. A trick play or two even, and these counters, a lot of counter runs, which seems to be, I'm told, is an Alex Adkins staple. He's kind of the running game coordinator. So we'll see if they can pull some more things out of the bag against Florida, because that might be necessary to win this game.
This problem is, as you mentioned, Reed, a cousin of the running game problem. If you can run the ball very effectively and get the dirty yards, you'll just score more in the red. I mean, one of the red zone failures on Saturday was after Harlem Berry's long run to get inside the 5, they just got stuffed in the run game 3 straight times, and it was fine. There was 3 minutes left in the game, and you're just trying to end the game. But the fact that you couldn't, in a situation where La Tech knew you were running the ball, all 20,000 people left in the stadium knew you were going to run the ball, everybody knew you were running the ball, and you just couldn't do it. That's a little bit concerning. My other concern here, and I'm thinking back to last year, is I don't know if this is a Garrett Nussmeier problem or a scheme problem or a receiver problem, but it seems like they are unable to really get those easy red zone touchdowns. You see some of these teams run concepts inside the 5 where it's like, somebody just popped wide open and they're just standing there waiting to catch the ball. It seems like when Nussmeier does throw a short yardage touchdown pass, it's a contested catch. It's something where he's got to throw it in a tight window. The easy button's just not there. Against
La Tech, I thought La Tech did a good job covering LSU's receivers, not only in the red zone, but just, throughout the field, throughout the whole game. And it didn't feel like, one, that Nuss had the accuracy he usually has, but also that, his receivers weren't really getting open against that defense, because what Louisiana Tech was doing, they weren't sending too many blitzes. They had 3 rushers, and they would drop 8 into coverage. And Nuss would have time to throw, but he didn't really necessarily have any receivers open. And I think that's one of the issues they ran into in the red zone against Louisiana Tech. And the one touchdown he had was Nick Anderson, where he sort of bought some time and moved out the pocket and threw a pass into a short window that was kind of off schedule, kind of one of those throws. So, I'm not sure exactly what to pin the issue on. But against Louisiana Tech, keep in mind that Nuss battled some inaccuracy issues, and at the same time, LSU's receivers weren't really getting open, and they had to do a little improvisation, and that's an area where Nick Anderson, I think, can help, and having him and an extra big body in there can help quite a bit. You saw that against Louisiana Tech, but if you're short on size in Trey'Dez Green, and if you're short on a run game, then you're going to have some trouble in the red zone, especially against the SEC defenses.
I wonder if we would feel any differently about LSU had they taken the field goal at the end of the first half against Clemson would say Ramos makes the kick, it would have been a very short kick, and gotten the touchdown pass that was disallowed by Barry and Brown, and they scored is 27-10. And then they scored 23 against La Tech. They had to let down. Would we be feeling a little different? Or some of the issues would still be there. But, I mean, they were this close to scoring, I think, 10 more points against Clemson.
I think the tenor of the conversation, I think you're absolutely right, but the tenor of the conversation would be completely different coming out of the Louisiana Tech game if Nussmeier had hit Barry Brown on that deep shot where he got intercepted on LSU's first drive. Yeah, it did. Like, he had Barry Brown open for a touchdown. It would have, if he had hit him in stride.
75-yard touchdown.
75-yard touchdown. Instead, he really way underthrew it, and it got intercepted. And that, I think that play, really shaped the tenor of the conversation coming out of the Louisiana Tech game. Because if he just converts that pass, which he's done so many times, then I think the whole feel of the game is different.
Yeah, we'll see it. And I mean, like, maybe we should have framed it this way at the beginning of this discussion, but we're still talking about the number 3 team in the country here, like they're 2-0. Things are okay. This is not like we're not, oh my God, what is wrong with LSU? Things are okay, and I think they have a lot of potential to get better. We know Garrett Nussmeier is a good quarterback. We know he's going to improve on some of that stuff. We know that some of these transfers they got in and some of these offensive linemen come with a high pedigree, like they are going to get better. I think it's very possible we look back in December and say this was LSU's worst offensive performance. And that's why we're talking about it, because they did not look good. But I do think that it's reasonable to expect quite a bit of improvement.
And the running game is the largest concern. I just feel like, big picture, they should have gotten more push against Louisiana Tech, and they didn't. So I think that's, a real concern.
A couple of things. You always have to have perspective, right? Florida would love to be 2-0 and talking about these kind of things, right?
So would Alabama.
And Alabama and Clemson and Texas and that sort of thing. And then we're not talking about the defense at all. I mean, the defense has given up 8.5 points per game in the first 2 games, and one of them was they stoned Clemson after they got the ball at like the 24-yard line following the Bauer Sharp fumble, and they had to kick a field goal. Otherwise, they gave up. There was a badly blown coverage against La Tech, late in the game. But that's going to happen occasionally. And Clemson had to convert 2 4th downs, including the touchdown run, to get its touchdown. So the defense has been terrific, and defense, provided they can stay healthy, reasonably healthy, that looks like it's going to continue to be a strength for LSU throughout the season. So not that La Tech was the best offensive team they're going to play, but they really statistically, it's weird to look at LSU to kind of analyze all this. They statistically dominated Louisiana Tech. They outgained them by more than 200 yards. They had 27 touchdowns, first downs to 12. They had 37 minutes of time of possession to about 23. I mean, they really dominated in a lot of areas that would have led you to believe the score would have been a lot more lopsided, but they've got, as Brian Kelly kind of said yesterday, they were lacking some of the little things, the attention to detail, that kind of tripped them up and maybe kept them from scoring more in the La Tech game. So I think you may be right. We may look back and say this. I think LSU is going to score more points against Florida than they did in either of the first 2 games. I may be proven wrong, but I think they will.
Yeah. Again, I said this at the top. I think part of the problem is the expectations. They went in and beat Clemson, and so everybody kind of expected them to come home and, like, let's put a whooping on La Tech and, be a top 5 team in the country and have this big party. And it just didn't happen. And so there may be a little bit of overreaction. So we've dug into it a little bit. I do want to move on, and let's talk a little Florida. We'll have our full LSU Florida preview podcast on Thursday. But, like, as you said, Florida's got its own set of problems. They lost 18-16 to South Florida on Saturday. South Florida's a good team. South Florida may be a playoff team, but that's still not a game that the Gators should be losing at home. You look at the rest of their schedule, they're coming to Baton Rouge this week. It doesn't get a whole lot easier. They still got to play almost every top team in the SEC. I mean, it is just, it's almost unfair what they did to Florida in this little 2-year schedule window.
8 of their remaining 10 opponents are ranked. 5 of them are the top 10, and they have Mississippi State, who just shocked Arizona State.
The SEC looks very tough this year. And we're going to end with a little bit of but SEC top to bottom. You mentioned Mississippi State. If that's the worst team in the league, they just beat the Big 12 favorite. Granted a last-minute touchdown at home. I mean, yeah, but they still beat the Big 12 favorite, and that's maybe your last place team. Maybe it's Kentucky, but that's one of your bottom teams. So Florida comes in 1-1, facing this gauntlet of a schedule. Billy Napier kind of got himself off the hot seat with a good finish last year, including a victory.
Starting and beating LSU.
Yeah, including a victory over LSU. He's right back there, I think, Reed. I mean, if he loses this game, they're going to be 1-2, and there's going to be calls for his job.
All right, perspective. The South Florida loss is not as bad as it looks or feels. South Florida is a legit good team. They waxed Boise State in week 1, and they could end up in the playoff.
Could be them versus Tulane for a playoff spot.
Yeah. So
very well happen.
So that loss is not a terrible loss, but it really, really, really hurts Florida's chances of getting into the playoff or finishing with 8 wins, because the schedule is so difficult. You couldn't afford to lose a game like this at home against a non-conference team when your SEC schedule looks that bad. So I think that Billy Napier really wants to get this win in Baton Rouge on Saturday to get them back on track, and that Florida team wants to get this win to get the season back on track and try to save face a little bit, because they don't have room for very much error at all, really. And so I think they'll come to Tiger Stadium with a pretty strong sense of urgency.
Yeah, I mean, you have DJ Lackway. He's considered one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. They got some weapons around him. You couldn't tell anything in their first win. I didn't even know Long Island had a football team. Long Island University. They beat them 55-0. I think their first game. But it's only the third week of the season. It's desperation time for Florida. I mean, their season, they have no hope. If they lose to LSU, so you have to expect that they're going to give LSU their best shot, and obviously have the confidence of having beaten LSU 27-16 last year in Gainesville. So we always knew this was going to be a very important game, for both teams, whether LSU beat Clemson or not. The LSU has some wiggle room, but they really need to. It really behooves LSU to hold service at home, right? To try to win all these games at home, and they've only lost 2 games at home under Brian Kelly. Yeah, so that part has been very good, and so because I don't think like I said last year going into the season, I think it's true again this year. I don't think anyone's going through the SEC undefeated, through the conference play undefeated. So you can afford if you're LSU, because you beat Clemson, you can afford a loss on the road if you come up short, but play well at Alabama or Ole Miss or something like that. But you really need to. You don't want to put yourself in that position of losing this one, because then if you go to lose at Ole Miss, then you can't lose another game to hope to get in the playoffs. So it's a very important game for both teams. Florida, I don't think Florida's as good as I didn't think they were quite as good as people thought they were coming into the year. So I think they're a dangerous team, but because of Lagway's ability to run and throw. But I think this is a game LSU should win if they play reasonably well.
I don't want to step too much on the Thursday show, but there are a couple key injuries you should be watching for Florida. One is Lagway himself. How healthy is he? He had an injury in the preseason, so we need to make sure exactly if he's 100%. The other one is Caleb Banks, Florida's star defensive lineman. Is he healthy? Is he going to be able to play? We're not sure. We should find out later in the week.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a wounded animal, and I don't mean that as a pun with the injuries, but Florida's backed into a corner here. They have at LSU, at Miami next week, home for Texas the week after that, at Texas A&M the week after that. I think I was looking at some look-ahead betting lines. I didn't see one for the Texas A&M game, but they're underdogs in all the rest of those games. I mean, they are staring at a 1-5 type start. And I think that they probably realize that in that building. I think Billy Napier probably realizes that. When that happened last year, when the calls for his job really started to get loud, he responded, right? That team responded. He got them to respond. So can he do the same thing early this season like that? To me, that's the main storyline here. And it's probably bad for them that LSU didn't thump Louisiana Tech, because then LSU would really be riding high coming into this.
That's kind of
maybe they get caught, and now Brian Kelly's got his team's attention. So I think that's kind of a real interesting story here.
Florida also has Florida State. Florida State in the finale.
Okay, Oklahoma, who looks good.
Yeah. Florida is talk about again. Florida's become a hard team to handicap. They've only had 4 seasons of 10 wins or more since Urban Meyer left. I mean, they've only finished ranked like 6 times. I mean, they're not the team they have not been the program that they were under Spurrier and Meyer for a long time. They've churned through some head coaches, and Billy, anyone has lasted more than 4 years since Urban Meyer left at Florida. This is the 4th year for Napier, and obviously he looks like he's in big trouble. This is they should win. Florida should win, but it's not what we are accustomed to seeing from Florida over the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah, no, 100%. So we'll see. I did want to. We've talked a little bit about this, but let's wrap up here. A little bit of an SEC update after 2 weeks. We'll call this stock up, stock down. When we look at the SEC title race, whose stock is up, and you've got your eye on them. Whose stock is down, and I think there's an obvious answer for that one, but maybe you don't think it's for real.
Stock up Oklahoma. Brent Venables looks like he's got an offense now. John Mateer looks like he's the real deal, and that offense is rolling pretty well. That was a big win for them this past week against Michigan. They were at home, but it feels like Oklahoma has finally, the pieces in place to make a run here toward the top of the SEC, so that they again, really tough schedule for them in their second year in the SEC. But it
behind
looks
Florida, they probably have the toughest.
Yeah, but it looks like they've got really an offense that can handle a tough SEC schedule like that, which they didn't have before. So keep an eye on John Mateer. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, I think. He should have
Heisman contender.
Yeah, he should have a really good year, and that's going to be a tough game for LSU at the end of the regular season.
Stock up for you, Brad?
I guess Oklahoma's a good one. Auburn, it seems
by 2, right there. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen.
And some people saying Tennessee. Tennessee is a team that they a top 4 team in the SEC. So I think I'll say Tennessee. You can have Auburn. I'll say Tennessee. How about that?
Yeah, I think Auburn. It got lost a little bit in the kind of the hubbub of the opening week, but going to Baylor and winning by 2 touchdowns, like Baylor turned around and beat SMU on the road last week. Like
an overtime, a thriller.
Yeah, it was a thriller. I mean, it's a close game, but like Auburn, that win at Baylor looks really good. I think that Hugh Freeze may have something, kind of.
That rushing offense with Jackson Arnold looked really, really sharp against Baylor. I thought that win was super impressive, especially with the way the rushing offense looked. Now the defense and the passing offense, we'll see, but that rushing offense is pretty dangerous. It looks like it can control games.
And you mentioned Mateer. There's a couple other guys around. Diego Pavia looks like he's taken another step. Vandy looks good. Bo Perbula at Missouri has thrown for over 600 yards in 2 games and ran for like another 100 and hasn't thrown an interception. I mean, there's some quarterbacks, Jackson Arnold at Auburn, who you kind of dismissed maybe in the preseason, and you look around and you go, the SEC might be really, really deep.
And we didn't even mention Taylon Green, Arkansas.
Yeah, Taylon Green looks really good.
Arkansas starter who's off to an awesome start. So the SEC is really strong top to bottom. What else is new, So this weekend was really good for the SEC, given how the wins that it got, how Mississippi State looked against Arizona State, how Vanderbilt looked against Virginia Tech, and how Oklahoma looked against Michigan. That's 3 really huge wins for the SEC.
Yep. Okay, stock down in the SEC.
Rab, you go first. The obvious one. Come on.
Alabama. They beat up on ULM over the weekend, but that doesn't tell you.
That was an angry win, man. Poor ULM.
Yeah, fine. That's not. We're gonna see. We're gonna learn something about Texas A&M this week. I think they go to Notre Dame, right? That's a big game. Georgia and Tennessee. Nobody's talking about Georgia.
Georgia's my stock down. They just kind of like. What they did against, I mean, they were fine against Marshall, but what they did, I can't remember who they were playing.
Austin Peay.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. Like, what do you do? You think LSU had a sleepy performance? I mean, Georgia. Now I know there was a big long weather delay in the middle of the game, but even before the weather delay, it was just sort of like, you guys are really not going to put up a bunch of points on Austin Peay.
Yeah. So that's a good one. So stock down still. Alabama. They've got. To prove themselves after getting Florida State's now in the top 10. I think it's still very hard to handicap all these. Even Ohio State, who's number 1. It's like everybody came into the season saying, "Well, Ohio State is not." They lost so much to the NFL draft. How good are they going to be? Well, now they're back to number 1 because they beat Texas. Texas is still people, I think the jury's still out on them. Someone's going to get into. Someone who we didn't expect is going to get into the SEC contention or playoff contention, and it's kind of still hard to handicap that at this point.
Slight stock down on Texas for me because Arch Manning is a little further behind than I thought he was at this season. At this point, it seems like he has quite a bit of work to do to develop and improve. I still think he's going to be a good quarterback one day, but it might just take a little bit longer than I thought it would be. And so I think that's probably a little bit of stock down for me for Texas. I mean, the Texas defense looks phenomenal, but I thought, we saw how rough it was for Arch in Columbus against Ohio State. And Texas handled San Jose State last week, but there were moments where Arch didn't look exactly comfortable or didn't really control that game like you really want him to be. So I think if you look at the quarterback situations at Texas and Georgia, that's something that I could see once we hit Thanksgiving or once we hit December, that could prevent those teams from really, making a run at a national title because there are question marks there.
I'll go out on a limb with one more stock down, South Carolina. They're 2-0, but they're like number 10 in the country. I don't think they're that good. LSU plays them in, I think, 4 weeks. I think South Carolina probably has at least one loss by then. They play Vandy this week. Vandy looks good. Mm-hmm. South Carolina goes to Missouri, then I think they play Kentucky. So, I could see, I think South Carolina is a decent team. I don't think they're anywhere near a top 10 caliber team from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I like Sellers a lot.
I do like Sellers, but
I think he's going to be responsible for a lot of what they do this season. And Dylan Stewart is going to come to Tiger Stadium, and he's going to be a problem. He's going to cause some issues there. So I think I'm a little bit higher on South Carolina than you are, but a lot of it boils down to really the two guys they have, Sellers and Dylan Stewart.
All right, that is our show for today. This has been the LSU Sports Insider Podcast for Tuesday, September the 9th. We will be back Thursday. Koki Riley and Wilson Alexander will be here, and we will preview the Tigers and the Gators. For our producer, Courtney Lawrence, he's Reed Darcy, he's Scott Rabelais, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching.